Okay, you've done the inner work. You sat in silence, maybe in the darkness, maybe on a mountain, maybe in ceremony. You've had real insights. I mean, real insights. Moments where something genuinely shifted inside of you. And then you come home, and within 2 days, you're in the same argument with the person you love the most. That doesn't sound like awakening to me.
I think I can relate to that, Mark. I've sat with people in ceremony who've had the most profound openings, genuine moments of complete clarity and love pouring out of them. And then I've watched them go home, return to their spouse, their marriages, their partnerships, and then 2 weeks later, they're like confused and ashamed. I thought I was done with this. But the awakenings were real and the pattern is also real. So both things can be true at the same time.
You know, I find that same thing happens when people do moment mindfulness. They have this powerful awakening experience, and then, like you said, 2 weeks later, they get in this giant fight with their partner. But by the end of this, you're going to understand why insight doesn't automatically change relationship patterns and why that's not a failure of your awakening. It's actually a doorway. You kick the door open, now it's time to walk through the doorway. Once you see what's happening between you and that person, you can work with it instead of against you. And so, welcome to Mastering Thought. I'm Dr. Mark Waller. I've been a marriage family therapist for almost 30 years. And this is Rachelle Lane, who's the founder of holdingceremoniespace.com, where ancient earth-based healing modalities and heart-opening ceremonies converge. God, I love that phrasing. By the way, if you're watching this, we understand that only about half of you are subscribers to the channel, and Rachelle and I are dedicated to really helping people not only awaken, but change their whole lives. And we want you to join us, be part of our team, and help other people do the same thing. So the key question here is why awakening doesn't automatically transfer to your closest relationships. People who are involved in your work, Rachelle, do they ask that question?
Absolutely.
You know, most people assume that if you've genuinely shifted inside, your relationship should naturally follow. But have you wondered why the closest people in your life who knew you before the shift seem to have these old patterns that are so hard to break? So why is that? I can tell you why it is. It's because that, you know, these people are triggers for our unfinished emotional business that we brought with us to the awakening experience. And now that we're awake, we finally have the tool we need to do the work to heal the relationship and ourselves in the process.
So
Yeah.
basically, what you're saying is our relationships aren't just there to make us happy and bring us bliss and love, Mark.
So the thing I say to people, which is very hard to hear, is the purpose of a relationship is to make you conscious, not happy.
Mm,
And so, you know, that really shifts the responsibility
yes.
from you making me happy to me trying to understand why you can't make me happy and what that's really all about.
Wow, that does take complete ownership and responsibility, but I love it. That's what our listeners are here for.
Well, and this is hard to hear, but I'm going to say this anyway. Even in an abusive relationship, you know,
Mm,
abusive relationships are not okay. You need to be safe. You need to have a safety plan, et cetera, et cetera. But my experience over nearly 30 years is if you're in one abusive relationships, your chances of being in another one is very high unless you
mm.
address what is going on that led you into that situation. You may think that it's random chance. I don't believe that's true. And we all carry kind of a blueprint inside of us that we repeat over and over again. And that's what really needs to be addressed.
Sounds sounds true, Mark. So I know you've been teaching us moment mindfulness, and that's how I was introduced to you is through this amazing thought watching process where we disidentify with being that thought or the thinking in our head. So, what's the difference though between knowing the voice is there and actually being able to become free from it?
So, so this is very confusing, and I get this question all the time. So this is really a two-step process. The
Mm-hmm.
first step is disidentifying from the voice in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Without the disidentification, we basically are automatrons walking around like one of Elon Musk's robots, just acting out our programming, over and over again. Okay, all right. So we went to the ceremony. We got online and we learned moment mindfulness and we had a big breakthrough.
Yeah.
Okay, that has nothing to do with the next step in the process. The next step in the process is every time these emotional reactions come up, now we have a tool that we
Yeah.
can use to go break that apart and see what's really going on inside of us. And that's what this is really all about. So the awakening is one thing, but then there's another step of work that needs to be done. And our emotional reactions are critical in doing
Yes.
that part of the work.
Well said. I say the same thing all the time. The ceremony is just the beginning of the work that's needed. Now the next step is the rest of the ceremony. I completely relate to that. So, what does it actually take then to stop doing it? So, I do my moment mindfulness practice. I
Mm-hmm.
catch myself observing these thoughts that are just coming to me, start to realize that they're not me, and then now I wait for these opportunities to be reacted or triggered. But let's say I'm in the middle of an argument Sunday night at 9 o'clock, and sometimes you just can't stop your reaction.
Right.
What do I do now?
Okay, so relationships happen in real time under pressure with history. Now,
Yes.
let me explain a principle here, and this is extremely important because if you can understand this principle, you can break this down very easily. If you have an emotional reaction comes from a part of the brain called the limbic system. The limbic system is almost entirely wired up by the time you're 5 or 6 years of age.
Hmm.
So if it's Sunday night and you're having an argument with your partner or your spouse, that means that fight or flight has been triggered, which is part of the limbic system.
Yeah.
And the trigger, the emotional trigger for that is coming from your childhood.
Mhm.
It's not possible for the trigger to come from anywhere else but your childhood because the emotional brain learned that triggering,
Yes.
function during childhood emotional learning in the primitive part of the brain. So if you can grab a hold of that, you immediately know one thing, that if I react, it's about me, it's not about you.
Woof. That is when I'm looking at my partner and they just said something to trigger it, that is a big thing to get. I think I would recommend everyone to take that bite that Mark just did, put it in record on your voice memo notes, and listen to that as soon as you are triggered, because that right now is liberation. Everything you just said. And I see the same thing, Mark, in ceremony where the medicine separates you from that voice. And you
Right.
can see that this pattern is actually happening,
Mm-hmm.
not you're not in control of it. It's just this automatic thing that comes up. So you get to see the ego at work. And
Right.
sometimes this is people's first time that they even know that they have an ego. I mean, I
That's
ask
right.
people, hey, listen to the voice in your head. They're like, what voice in my head? What are you talking about? It's just me
Right.
thinking. So a lot of people, I would say most people are so identified with their thoughts and their thinking that they don't even know that
Right.
that it is not them. So seeing is just the beginning of this. And like you said, the next step is start to realize, oh, this came from my childhood, or this
Yep.
came from my mom. In my case, I've linked my reaction, most of my triggers, back to my relationship with my father. So that
Uh-huh.
would be a great question to ask,
Right.
even if I can't stop it in the moment. Later on, maybe a
Right.
couple hours later, I'm sitting with the disagreement, or I'm sitting with the trigger that I got. I could ask myself, okay, how does this relate to my relationship in childhood with my dad?
Exactly.
And
Now, so you've said so many important things that we need to break down.
okay,
That it's just excellent. No, number one, so the limbic system is the emotional brain. It's the child brain, and it's linked to a network in the brain called the default mode network. And between the default mode network is the network in the brain that talks in our heads. Okay, now this is where Rachelle and I have common ground, because in ceremony, when you take plant medicine, or go through the ceremony, you turn off the default mode network. Now, the default mode network in the limbic system is the survival complex in the brain, which is the ego. And so when somebody is experiencing, plant medicine, psychedelics, whatever it is, they are separated from their ego. When they do
yes.
moment mindfulness, which is what we teach on this channel, they are also separated from their ego. So this
Mm.
separation from the ego is extremely important. And then you realize this thing we call ego is all about survival. And I really want to boil this down, because the ego wants you to die so I can live. It's just that
How
simple.
disappointing.
It's just that simple. So, and if you really follow this to its logical conclusion, you realize the thing that's keeping us from a completely awakened, enlightened life is our need to survive.
Whoa. So survival is the antithesis of our liberation, of our
That's right.
freedom. The
That's right.
ego is like standing at the door, pretending it's like a fox that's gonna
Right.
guard the chicken coop, saying, oh, come over here, let's do some meditation, let's do this, I'm gonna help you. And it has no intention of ever letting you go.
No, no,
That
no.
is, wow, that's
And
harsh.
so, and so we're going to talk about lions and unicorns in a second. So if you're a lion, you're obsessed with rejection. If you're a
Yes.
unicorn, you're obsessed with conflict. And, you could be married to a cardboard cutout propped up in the corner, and you would still interpret everything they're doing through the lens that you brought with you, that perceptual lens from childhood. And
Yeah.
so if you really want to be free, you need to understand that your emotional reactions are never about the other person. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I am not making an excuse for unacceptable behavior,
Yeah.
but your reaction to their behavior is about you. And that's so important. And so, you know, number one is disidentification through moment mindfulness is an awakening experience that allows you to see all this. You instantly become an expert on your own psychology.
Yeah.
The same thing is true in plant medicine, and I would urge everybody to see the episode we did last week, Rachel and I, where we talked about this concept and how they both mesh together and kind of accomplish similar things. And it's very, very interesting background information. But if you can take complete responsibility for the fact that your reactivity is about you and not about the other person, you will take a giant leap toward complete healing and freedom right there.
Wow. I just felt like this big sigh come over me when you said that, because that just gives a very simple way, like a hope almost, like there is relief in store and it's up
Uh-huh.
to us. So what a beautiful outlook. So Mark, why do you think that intimate relationships will find the blind spots that like years of therapy and maybe ceremonies and other things just will miss?
So let me go back to the limbic system for a second and explain why what you're saying is absolutely true. What in the question, all this comes from the limbic system. The limbic system was nearly completely wired up by the time you're 5 or 6 years of age,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so when we get so that part of the brain doesn't know you've grown up. It doesn't know you've left home. It doesn't know you've learned anything new. It doesn't know that you have a partner. It doesn't know anything but home, where we came from, our family of origin. And so when you move in and you take up housekeeping with another person, that part of the brain identifies that that partner as the parent.
Wow.
And we begin to act as if we're living with the parent instead of the partner. Now, it's gigantic, but it's very insidious. We don't know this is happening. This is a complete hijacking that's taking place. But it only
Oh, wow.
happens when the other person crosses a certain emotional barrier and comes close enough, then they become the shadow of that parent and they lose their identity as our partner, and we start reacting as if it's the parent.
Oh my goodness. So you're talking about two grown adults
Yeah,
that have, like you said, moved out of the house, maybe successful in life, maybe have accomplished all these other things, but they get together in partnership. And now they're like two 5-year-olds fighting the same way
exactly.
they fought with or how their parents made them feel. That just makes so much sense. And the whole everything you're talking about is because we are unconscious.
Yes.
And so what's the most important thing we have to do, Mark?
The most important thing that we have to do is we have to find a way to wake up. See, so and people don't like to hear that. Yeah, well, then they'll say to me, "Well, okay, if I wake up, then what will I do?" No, seriously. I mean, seriously. And I will and I will say, I want to reflect back to you what you just said. You just admitted you are sound asleep, and now you want to know what you would do differently if you woke up. Are you kidding me? Come on.
Ah,
The-
that was, of course, the ego in full effect answering the whole time
right.
while we're sound asleep. Oh my
And then
Lord.
we'll spend an hour going over this, and then they'll say, "Well, is there another exercise I can do that'll help this?"
Or
No.
what I've done in the past is, well, what about him? What's he gonna do about it?
Yeah. Well, don't both of us have to make the change if we're going to have a successful relationship?
Ah, okay, I'm guilty. I think I've said that before. I think I've actually said those exact words to you.
And
Well, what's he gonna do? I'm gonna be perfect. What about him?
so, 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 there's a lot of different ways of going at this, but it boils down to the fact that the brain is a gigantic, enormous survival machine trying to predict what's going to
Yeah,
happen next. And
yeah.
the template that it uses for that is our childhood emotional learning. Oh, well, this
Mm,
is not good. This is not going to lead
mm-mm.
anywhere. And our whole basis for our living is survival. And in order to survive, we have to interpret everything as an attack.
Yeah.
And so our mind is full of attack thoughts and strategies of how to get around, and survive the attack that's coming. Well, how in heaven's name are you supposed to have a successful relationship with this going on? There's just no way.
Oh my God, that would be like if one of your parents was domineering and controlling, or like you didn't get a lot of freedom. You're literally looking at your spouse as that person that's trying to
Ex-
control you and
exactly.
domineer. I'll never be free of this.
That's right.
And that's crazy, because
It's
I would say that most spouses do not want to control the other person at all.
that's
But if
right.
that other spouse is feeling that way, the unicorn is avoiding being dominated and controlled,
Okay.
then I that would be crazy. And then the lion is chasing after them saying, you've rejected me, validate me. So they're getting more and more excitable and maybe even argumentative because they want that validation reflected.
So
What a mess.
what you're referring to is the fact that this is not an argument about the dishes or tone of voice
Yes.
or feeling, or spending money and not filling out the checkbook, or whatever the argument, of the groceries or whatever it is. That underneath the surface there's an old pattern
Yes.
about wounds, about being controlled or abandoned or feeling unseen, and that's what you're referring to. And I
Mm-hmm.
call that the dance of the lion and the unicorn. And what I found and this has been validated. This was validated actually after I wrote my book. Here's my book, The Dance of the Lion and the Unicorn, if you're interested. It's
I
also
read it.
available.
It was
Did you?
amazing. I did. Yeah. That
We'll
was the
pause
first
so
thing
you
as soon
can
as
tell
we
me
got
how
off the
amazing
panel.
it was. Please go ahead.
Okay. It was great. I saw the moment mindfulness, and then I am in partnership right now, and I thought, what, that makes sense because some of these disagreements we're having aren't really adding up. And I just went through immediately, identified myself as the lion. Immediately,
Right.
my friend is the unicorn. And it was just like so clear. And I really got a lot of clarity on what was going on and the roles we were playing. However, as you said, it wasn't, awareness was the first step.
Right.
So that gave me a lot to work with. And then now I've been, personally working with you as a therapist as well as a friend. And now I'm really understanding, oh, my reactions are what are really causing a lot of the conflict.
So yes, and so you can see this is up on the screen right now. We've got what I call the dance of the lion and the unicorn, and you can see two circles, two people. Those circles are the limbic system.
Mm.
And so the one on the right I call the lion, and the one on the left I call the unicorn. And you can see that when the lion gets angry, the unicorn says, "Oh no, here we go again. I need to avoid the conflict." They hate the conflict. That avoidance looks like rejection, like nobody cares to the lion, and that makes them more angry. And it goes around and around like that. This basic dance has been now borne out in research. It's called uh, demand withdrawal. The lion is the demander,
Mm.
and the unicorn is the withdrawer. And when I first wrote the book, this was not very well known. There were a couple very famous people before me that had seen this pattern and had called it out. Um, but I wrote my dissertation about this, and I wrote the book, The Dance of the Lion and Unicorn. And even if you haven't had an awakening experience, I tell you, if you read this book, your relationship will change in the reading of the book. That's how
For sure.
fundamental this is. And so you can see right here now, the goal is not to be a better lion or a better unicorn. These are unconscious patterns. The goal is an awakening. Because when you're experiencing the anger and interpreting that nobody cares, you are unconscious. You are in your emotional brain experiencing childhood pain, not trauma, but pain. And the same is true for the unicorn, who views everything as a threat. A relationship is extremely threatening to unicorns, generates a lot of anxiety, so they want to withdraw and avoid the conflict. And of course, what both people don't understand is these two people are struggling with automatic, deeply unconscious childhood emotional patterns. And it's not meant to hurt or damage the other person. They're trying to protect themselves.
Wow. I mean, when you say it like that, Mark, that gives me so much more compassion for my
Uh-huh.
partner. It it it's like an understanding now of they really are just trying to protect themselves. So like, yeah, that makes me have so much more love and compassion for them.
Well, imagine this: if your partner was raised in a violent abusive family, every time you raise your voice, even if it's in
Mm,
excitement, he's going to experience the threat of that abuse.
mm.
He may be 6'4" and a ton of muscles, but the little boy inside of him is going sideways,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what the heck do I do now? And you will have no clue that's going on with this person.
Wow. That, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. So it's like knowing can trigger you or hold this transformation more than this intimate partner. It's like
That's
you
right.
just said,
That's right.
it's the perfect opportunity for you to awaken and
That's
heal
right.
is this intimate relationship we have
Right.
with our partners. Wow.
Or you can go to the big workshop and buy the t-shirt and the book and convince yourself that you've had a life-changing experience, and then go home and realize, 60 days later that nothing has changed and you still don't get it,
Yeah.
and it's still the other person's fault, you know.
Yeah.
And that, people cycle through that over and over, and it's tragic because they want healing and they want freedom and
Yes.
fulfillment,
Yes.
and they're not getting
Yes.
it that way. You have to get down where the dirty work needs to be done. But when you do, you realize it's actually pretty easy. But you
Yeah.
have to you have to set aside your pride and realize that even if you think you're the victim, you're up to your neck in this thing, and you need to find out what's going on with you and where it came from.
Wow. Love, love all of that. I see so much reward in our couples workshop and retreats that we do, doing plant medicine with couples, because I watch two people sit across from each other and they get to witness themselves in the state of pure love,
Uh-huh.
because the medicine is away the ego,
Right.
and they stop looking at each other as enemies, and they can look at each other through these eyes of really what they are, which is their teachers, which is their lovers, their
Right.
partners, and then their mirrors. So it's really amazing, profound. I've seen it so many times of being able to reconcile all that hurt and pain, and it just turns to love in these ceremony workshops.
The
Wow.
universe has sent you a teacher. It's the person you're living with. And if you can't
Mm,
take that in, you're not ready for personal growth. So,
wow.
what bridges the gap between inner insight and relational change is when you can stand in the midst of it and see what it is and where it's coming from. The moment you've been triggered while you're still in it, and choose a different perspective than the one your monkey brain wants to give you in that moment. And that's not a technique, that's a
Mm,
capacity. You know,
very well said.
we have developed the muscle we need to stand in the storm and realize it's not a storm
Yes.
after all.
Mm,
And when I can do that and I look at you, I'm suddenly filled with compassion because I don't want that little girl
yes.
to feel rejected anymore. I am not going to be that person no matter what.
Yes. Wow. You just make me want to call the person right now and just be as supportive and loving as I possibly can, because I see that in everything what you just said is the absolute truth. So, what when the lion and the unicorn are getting locked into this, you said that they're seeing each other as the parent,
That's
right? That
correct.
abuse parent that they had. And so what is the actual moment when that pattern can break? Um, when they go unconscious, what is something that you can recommend for people to do?
Well, what they can do, first of all, is because this is difficult to do at first. So
Hmm.
if you can only remember it the next day. So the next day you remember, okay, last night, my husband and I had an argument and I got angry. Ask the question, how is that related to my childhood?
Okay.
Am I a lion? First of all, it would be helpful if you knew if you were a lion and a unicorn. And I'm going to
Okay.
show you a QR code in a minute to a quiz you can take to find that out. If you're a lion, your issue is basically around feeling rejected. If you're a unicorn, your issue is around conflict and feeling pressured and controlled. Okay, if you've got that much now, then the next day you can think, okay, when you're rational again, you're not all, filled with, fight or flight chemicals. You can just ask the question, okay, I reacted last night. How is that related to my childhood? And if you know about rejection or conflict avoidance, you probably know which parent it was.
Mm-hmm.
So you can ask the question, how's this related to my father or my mother? And then don't try to answer the question.
Hmm.
We can't analyze this. This will come to you as an insight, a sudden realization if you will continually, and the scripture says, knock and the door will be open. This, all we're doing here is we're just knocking. Somebody else is going to open the door. And we will get our answer. And gradually what will happen is you will be able to shorten that time frame when you react and when you ask the question. And then there's a moment where you get it, you connect the dots and you realize, oh, I see how this works. And you're having this interaction and you start feeling triggered. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm hearing my critical mother. Has nothing to do with her at all. And all of a sudden the spell is broken. And
Wow.
you only have to do that 2 or 3 times before you're free of the pattern.
Oh, this is beautiful, Mark. So, as you were stating, these are greatest teachers are our intimate partnerships.
Right.
And really, I think if I were to summarize what really relates to like the moment mindfulness and what you've been teaching us is that our mind is our enemy, and this untrained reactive mind is really what's creating all this suffering.
Yeah, it is.
And Nietzsche, who was a pretty famous philosopher and teacher, he said, "I met the enemy, and it is us."
Yeah.
So we can go back in, look at the responsibility that we've taken, or take responsibility for how we are perceiving this. And
Uh-huh.
I can just see this could be an instant change. I mean, I've been able to apply this in my life, and I have already seen a pretty remarkable shift. So, thank you for taking this work and making it available to everyone. And, you don't have to be this great spiritual being, although it's kind of funny because spirituality is everything you're doing. We are spiritual beings. So anything we're
Uh-huh.
doing is spiritual work. But, you don't have to be yogi. You don't have to go to dark retreats. You don't have to do all this stuff. You don't even have to
No.
go to medicine ceremony. You just don't.
Yeah.
This is all a part of the app. So thank you for making this so accessible and,
So
easy every.
if you really want to dive into this on May 30th, I'm going to hold an intensive workshop. It's going to be 2 hours, and then there's going to be a follow-up for each and every person in the workshop who gets a private session to follow up on what we covered. And we're going to take people through all this material so that they can begin the journey. The intensive will be May 30th, starts at 10 o'clock in the morning. There's a link. There will be a link below, and contact me, and we'll go through it. We'll get you signed up, and then also I did mention that there is a quiz. You can take the quiz. That link will be below as well. If you scan this QR code, it will take you to the quiz. You can find out if you're a lion or a unicorn.
Wow, what an amazing discussion. This is oh, I love all of this. I love all of it. So if you're curious about what ceremony can look like in the context of couples work or with plant medicine, please reach out to me. This isn't that the medicine doesn't heal the relationship, but it does create the conditions where you finally can and get to see each other in a whole new way.
And these two things can work together, the ceremony and moment mindfulness, because not everybody wakes up one way or the other. So we need all the tools we can get. And we're here to help you. So reach out if you want some one-on-one coaching. Let us know. Um, we can do all that. Our mission is to set the world free from the primitive brain so we can all get along here and enjoy heaven on earth.
Yes, I love it. And this has been a privilege to be able to uh, work with you on this, Mark, because I really feel strongly that there are so many of us now waking up to this idea that we can be liberated, that it is the time right now to become these light bearers. And that doesn't mean, uh-oh, are we done?
No, no, we're not done.
It just went start with us. Oh, okay. Should I end it? Are we done?
No, go
Oh,
ahead.
uh,
What in wrapping up, you would say what?
and so thank you so much for this work you're doing. And I'm so grateful to be able to work with you. This is something that I believe wholeheartedly that we are here right now is to share this light with everyone that is open to it and to let them know there is liberation available. And it is something that's in reach for every person. You don't have to go to the jungle. You don't have to go to the ashram. You can do this right from your living room.
And we want you to do it with us. So please like and subscribe.
Yes.
Help us promote the channel because there's really nothing like this. There's a lot of, surface level do this, do that kind of stuff, but this is where the rubber meets the road and we want you along on the journey. So we'll see you at the next stop along the way.
Bye. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.